Right. So I'm basically just here at this point to introduce Brett Dieris. So Brett is a Milwaukee, Wisconsin-based astrologer. He's a tarot reader, a business consultant with nearly 3 decades of experience serving his clients worldwide. He specializes in modern, evolutionary, medical, mundane, business, and financial astrology, and has studied under contemporaries of Carol Rushman and others. Brett is the host of a podcast YouTube channel called Beyond the Zodiac Astrology Coffee Talk, which I'm excited to go check out. Brett, I've never seen it, so I'm going to definitely go check that out. Everyone else should. Beyond the Zodiac Astrology Coffee Talk, where he shares his expertise with a global audience. Through personalized consultations, classes, coaching, he helps individuals and businesses align with their purpose and thrive. Brett is a member, of course, of OPA and ISAR and serves on the board of NCGR-Milwaukee. So Brett, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dabney. Thank you, Celeste. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for stopping in on this delightful Sunday afternoon. We're going to hop right into the presentation because there is a lot of material to cover, and it's about timing. Because as astrologers, we know that timing is everything. And what better way to set your business up for success than by using the predictive tools of astrology to time your business? So now, can everyone see the screen?
Yes, I
Just give me a
believe
thumbs
so.
up in the chat. Awesome. Okay, so timing is everything. And so these are my predictive techniques for strategically planning my business. It's not an exhaustive list because a lot of astrologers do plan their business by the moon. But these are just some of my tips and tricks so that you can add them to your arsenal for later. And so here's me. If you guys want to get a hold of me, there's my information. And then jumping right in, how can astrology really help us with our strategic planning? Well, astrology provides us with the framework and the tools for each level of the planning process. There are 3 levels to planning your business. The first one is the visionary level. It's what happens on a grand scope. It's your ultimate vision. The second is tactical planning, which is how do you get to that vision? And the third level of strategic planning is operational, which is what are we doing on a day-to-day basis to ensure that our goals are being met? And so understanding both planetary and synodic cycles help you and your business anticipate opportunities and navigate challenges. So, leveraging these predictive techniques, businesses can really time their initiatives, anticipate challenges, and align strategies for greater efficiency and success. Now, everything starts with a foundation and a framework. And the framework of all business planning is the natal chart of your business. So, as we know as astrologers, the business chart and the natal chart, it's the foundation of all of your work. It gives you the grand overview of everything that is to be, right? It is your full natal promise. And the key to accurate natal chart calculation for your business is all about finding when is your business's exact moment of first breath. And so, when was your business born? So, I define the birth of a business by the first time there's a public exchange of energy, money, for your product or service. You can also consider these as possible alternatives. You can also consider the date you established an official tax ID, date that you filed articles of incorporation, and the date that you launched a business or website before or after establishing a tax ID. We all do things in different alignments and different arrangements, but I think that the first exchange of energy is the most accurate because prior to exchanging that energy and getting that first breath moment, what you have is a conception chart. It's applicable, it's valid, but it's not the most accurate. And even if your business name changes, you don't have to establish a new business natal chart because all of those changes are going to be reflected in your progressions or your solar arc directions, and other, far out forecasting tools. And so the first breath chart remains the best chart until you put it to rest officially. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but everything in astrology is about alchemy. And so the alchemical process of putting your business to rest in order to re-elect or elect a new business chart is very important. And so here are some of my tips and tricks for election and re-election of the business chart. So why would you want to re-elect or elect? Well, if you have a debilitated ruler of the ascendant or midheaven, if you have debilitated rulership in the second, sixth, eighth, and 10th houses, which are really strong business placements, any retrograde of a personal planet or a social planet. The outer planets don't matter so much when you're electing that chart because a retrograde Pluto isn't as bad as you think it might be. And so ideally, you're looking for luminaries that are in prominent positions, creative aspects like trines, sextiles, quintiles to the luminaries, and you're also looking to creative aspects to the ascendant and midheaven. You want no planets in retrograde, and ideally, you want benefics, so Jupiter or Venus, as rulers of your ascendant, midheaven, second, or eighth. If possible, your benefics and malefics should have what's known as mutual reception. So if you have a malefic in a benefic sign, the benefic should also be in that malefic sign. That cancels out or mitigates some of the negative influences that maybe Saturn can bring. And now, if you're going to re-elect your business chart, you need to put the previous one to rest. And now your election for a new chart should be made after number one, your business has been dissolved and your business should be finalized. And it should be after the payment of the last taxes. Because once that occurs, then you are no longer responsible for that previous business. You have now closed that chapter. And so you want to plan your re-election of a business natal chart for after that. And the most important part for any election is you want to use both your ancient and your modern rulerships. Because a lot of times now we look at the modern rulerships of signs like Aquarius. Well, the ancient ruler is Saturn, so you don't want a debilitated Saturn in a prominent position. And so here's an example of what a business chart might look like. I did use my own personal business for the example of this, and this is the foundation for all of your visionary planning, because all of your visionary planning is laid out in your natal chart and the progressions. And so you notice that the sun is in a prominent position and it's conjunct both of the malefics, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing because Saturn and Mars give an action of focus, drive, and determination. So, and then you notice that the moon is in a prominent position. The moon is in Aquarius. Moon is in Aquarius in the seventh house, so it's about client based. And then your ascendant is then Cancer, which is all about healing, nurturing, and supporting. And now going over the three levels of strategic planning and what tools I use for each, when you're doing your visionary planning, your business natal promise is the best, and then following your secondary progressions and also your solar arc directions to give you a broader look of grand schemes. Tactical planning, which is how you're going to achieve those visionary goals, includes your short-term goals and efforts. And an example would be like your 1 to 3 year plan or a 5-year plan. And for the tactical planning, I oftentimes use the progressions and I also use a business solar return. Transits of the outer planets, because they can have a longer effect, and also transits of social planets. Where is Saturn going to be in your chart? What is going to be giving you difficulty? Where is Jupiter going to be in your chart? Where do you have growth and expansion and opportunities for learning? And then I also use the luminary progressions for operational planning, and personal planets I'll also use for operational planning. It's your day-to-day operations, and it's also how you streamline your workflow. So the first step in strategically planning is to look at how your business is progressing. And two of the tools that I use for that are secondary progressions. Now, the secondary progression advances the natal chart using the formula 1 day for a year. Your progressed natal chart is oftentimes going to reflect your inner growth and external evolution throughout your business cycle. It's a major indicator of structural changes, milestones, and can oftentimes point out exigencies or emergencies. Now, if you want a little bit more than what a progression can give you, look to a tool like your solar arc directions. So the solar arc directions take your progressed position of the sun and it moves all of the planets the same number of degrees. So you're going to see the movements of outer planets. Now, Pluto transits are good things to watch out for, as well as Saturn transits and Mars transits, because those planets can have they can have an influence that causes you to restructure, refocus, or change in some way, shape, or form. So, how is your business progressing? What I look for when I look at the business progressions are the progressed moon. You want to look at the sign, the house, the phase, and the aspects that it's making. Your progressed luminaries are going to be the greatest activators of things in your chart. And so your progressed sun, you also want to look at the sign, the house, and if it's changing signs. Your progressed personal planets, you look for the sign, if there's a sign change, and retrogrades. And then you also want to pay attention to your progressed angles, because your progressed angles are going to highlight certain things in your chart. And they also act as activators of major themes or things that you will be encountering. So let's look at a couple of examples here. So we noticed before in that business chart, the original sun was placed at 25 degrees of Pisces. So you know that within about 5 years, the sun is going to be changing signs. The midheaven is going to be changing signs. And your moon will also be in a different location. So looking at this, you can tell that your business is going to be entering into a new phase. Your progressed moon is going to be at an anaretic degree. It officially starts a new moon phase, so that's going to be moon conjunct the sun. That's a new moon phase. And it also is going to be in conjunction with the midheaven. Your progressed sun is also at the anaretic degree in conjunct the midheaven, and it's making a transition from a mutable sign to a cardinal sign. That shift in energy is a new phase and direction. So you're going from kind of that amorphous, side hustle to now I'm getting serious about this. A move from Pisces into Aries is definitely an indication that you are getting serious and you are going forward with entrepreneurial vigor and with vigor and with gusto, because Aries is definitely a sign that is known for its gusto and head forward movement. And progressed aspects to the natal, you see a lot of opportunistic aspects. So you'll see sextiles and you'll see trines. It's helpful, it's not necessarily challenging, and they're aspects that require a little bit of work. And then your progressed angles, your luminaries are going to be conjunct your midheaven, your progressed midheaven, which is now sitting up at 29 degrees of Pisces, and your part of fortune, which is also something that I look at in a progressed chart. Where is your progressed part of fortune? Because your progressed part of fortune is where sometimes forward movement, where money is made, where your greatest passion and joy is. Your progressed part of fortune in this example is conjunct your ascendant. So that gives an indication that you are loving the forward movement and progression of where your business is going. Now, further down the road, you may come to points where you're shifting focus, and you may have points of tension or periods of tension. So you have to look at where your aspects are and what message are your aspects telling you. In your progress chart, when you start seeing a lot of squares and when you start seeing a lot of aspects that are causing tension, so squares, oppositions, you know that the focus of your business is going through a shift. And so you also want to look at the progressed moon. The progressed moon in this case, it's conjunct Jupiter and it's also conjunct the natal descendant. So the emphasis with the natal descendant is going to be about your clients. It's going to be about the other people. So you might be adding someone onto your staff. You might be getting an assistant. You might be looking for clients. You might be doing a lot of outreach. And it's also opposite the natal ascendant. So you are now challenged and forced to move forward. And you can also tell that you're approaching a lunar return. So that's the completion of a 29-year lunar cycle. And then just for fun, here are the progressions for today. I thought I'd throw that in there. So the progressions for today, you're going to notice a lot of quintiles. If you don't use quintiles as aspects, they're really useful. It tells you what your business is doing well. It tells you where you're doing things naturally, where there's not a lot of tension, there's not a lot of movement. Everything is going according to plan. So Venus quintile is great business expansion. Your finances are good, things are moving forward, and you're becoming a lot more serious as it's a quintile to Saturn. Your progressed Mars will give you an indication of your forward movement, action, and drive. So it's quintile your natal Uranus. So you're breaking boundaries and you're going outside of your comfort zone. And then your progressed Uranus is also making a quintile to your south node, which means that being different and going your own path is comfortable for you. And then the progressed angles for today, both the ascendant and descendant, are transitioning into the natal second and eighth house. So you know that now is a time where you are focusing on earned income and you're focusing on your savings, assets, and equities. And then if you want to add a little bit of extra, a little bit of extra detail, you can look at your solar arc directions. When you're planning, the solar arc directions are going to highlight your milestones, and they can also highlight some crises or exigencies, or give you something that you can prepare for. Preparation is key. So when you see an aspect like Pluto making a quintile to your natal Mercury, you're changing how you communicate with people. You're changing how you interact with people. And so you can make those adjustments and you can make those arrangements and add that into your goal setting for the year. You can also tell that the directed moon is entering into a disseminating phase. It only moved ahead about 29 degrees. And so you're entering that period of an exiting square with natal Pluto. So you can tell that you're coming out of a period of change and transition. So that square to the natal Pluto was actually me leaving my day job to do this full time. And you can tell that the emphasis is going to be shifting onto teaching as your directed moon is now entering into the ninth house. And now getting down to how are you going to accomplish some of these things? When you notice these things in your progressions and in your solar arc directions, now's the time to really pay attention to the energies and to everything that's going on. You pay attention now to your transits and you make elections for the accomplishment of those goals. So transits and retrogrades are dynamic forces that mold the terrain of your business landscape. And they're among some of the most powerful tools for strategic planning. And so when a change or shift is observed in your progressions or your directions, it's the transits and retrogrades that create the environment for realizing your vision. And by employing elections as part of your tactical planning, you can now plan your launches. You can now plan your initiatives for marketing, plan your changes to your website, plan that podcast. And you can deconstruct those visions into manageable segments. So it makes your goals not only attainable, but easily achievable. And so once you can understand how to use all of that cosmic energy, it really does impact your day-to-day operations and puts a lot of things into perspective. And it lets you know, where have you been putting your energy? And have you been putting your energy into something that is going to benefit you? Or are you working against the flow of what the universe is trying to tell you to do? So, and once you align your day-to-day actions, you can align them with your long-term goals, and you can also align them with the whole vision of where your business is going. So here's some of my guidelines for using transits. So when you look at transits, you look at outer planet transits primarily for tactical planning because their aspects take longer. And once you see planets like Saturn and Jupiter and Uranus and Pluto in your day-to-day chart making aspects, you can tell what kind of energy there's going to be. Is it transformative energy with Pluto? Is it revolutionary or innovative or technological energy with Uranus? Or is it an area of opportunity where you need to be focused, Saturn? And once you can see where all the planets are, you can prepare for some of the sign and house changes. Because as the outer planets change signs and change houses, that places a special emphasis on that part of your chart. Now, when you look at personal and social planets, like when you look at Mercury, Venus, Mars, and even all the way up to Saturn, I primarily use those for operational planning. I pay special attention to Venus and Jupiter. The benefics show you where money is going to be made, and also where you're spending your money, where you excessively are kind of losing, like in the case of a Jupiter retrograde. And we'll get to retrogrades in a little bit, but they do have a purpose. Don't fear them. And you also need to learn to love your Saturn, because Saturn is really about determination, reestablishing your boundaries, and it's also about where do you need structure? What needs to be held up a little bit more? The more work you put into your Saturn, the more you get out of it. And then you also need to understand the purpose and utilize retrogrades fully. So luminary transits, both sun and moon, act as activators. The sun will highlight areas of opportunity, and the sun will also highlight your monthly focus. The sun travels through all 12 houses. What house is being highlighted this month? What sign is being highlighted this month? What tasks are you going to do to take advantage of that energy? And then you also want to prioritize your tasks based on the moon sign. And you want to use the moon to track your goals. So if you set a goal on a new moon, use the phases of the moon to track the progress. And when you're making elections for your launches, you want to make sure that your primary social planets have not been in retrograde for a period of time, are not currently in retrograde, nor will they be entering into a shadow period. And so when you're looking at planets like Mercury, Mercury rules your communication, your marketing, and also your thought process. So you want to pay attention to that and plan your social and all of your marketing things, all of your social media, all of your emails, all of your, reaching out and interacting with people. You want to plan those and elect those for prominently placed Mercury transits. Venus is all about finances and image and values. So Venus, any strong Venus transit is going to be a great time to reevaluate how are you presenting yourself? What is the image that you are conveying? And does your website need a refresh? So looking at the current transits for today, this tells you what I'm working on. Mars in the first house means that it is an outward push. We're going to talk about the retrograde in a minute, so don't worry about that. So, Mars is the outward push. And so, Mars is going to be where you place your energy, your drive, and where you're going to direct your focus. And it gives you a great deal of energy. So, can give you an indication that there's a lot of activity going on. There's a lot of forward movement. There's a lot of reaching out. There's a lot of action. So this could be a time when you are doing a lot of events. It can be a time when you're doing a lot of presentations, talks. It can be a time where you're taking on more clients. And then you also have Jupiter over here on the other side in the sixth house. So when you're reading that transit and planning your day-to-day operations, are you taking on too much? Are you doing too much? Are you just taking on everything for the sake of taking on everything? So Jupiter in Capricorn, being as how it's Saturn ruled, tells you that you need to temper that Jupiter need for expansion with some real boundaries. And you're in the process of learning boundaries. So when you're planning and when you're looking at what should I be focusing on, you can look to see that you need to focus on not taking on too much. Don't do everything because you want to grow, you want to expand, and you want everything. You're going to be overly optimistic. You're going to be, overly ambitious. And so this is a time when you really start to look at your ambition and decide what's necessary and what's not necessary. And then putting everything together so that you can see what phase you're in and what weather is affecting that phase. These are the progressions and the transits for today. So the inner ring is going to be your natal chart. The ring in the middle, I put the progressions in the middle because the progressions are kind of like what's growing. How has your initial seed phase changed? And then I look at the transits on the outer wheel. So what weather is coming through and impacting how you're growing, and what you're doing. Do you guys have any questions so far?
Hey Brett, yes,
Yeah.
there are definitely some questions for you. So let's take them one by one. If you have a personal business like an event center and you sell registrations online, but first the first day you welcome the door open the doors, what date would you use as the birth chart?
In the case of that, I would do it as the day that you open up the door. So it's a public declaration of like, I'm here. You have opened yourself up to the energy exchange. And so you've already done the planning, you've already done the conception. Now, when you finally make it public, that's the key. Making it public, opening the doors would be when I would place the business chart.
Great. To calculate the business natal chart, is there a standard time to use if you don't have the exact time?
The standard time that I would use would be 12 o'clock p.m. So that places the sun in the prominent position of your midheaven.
Can you share how your business changed with the secondary progressions from 1999 to 2022?
Oh, absolutely. There were tons of changes. And so had I anticipated some of those changes, I could have avoided major pitfalls. So the first, between 1999, right, the first chart, that is actually when I first registered my business. So I placed my business out into the public before I registered it. Shh, don't tell my accountant. And so that was that moment when I declared that, you know what, I want to do this full time. I want to make this a career. I want to make it official, and that's the sign change between the Pisces, like, I'm just going to do this on the side. I do it for fun. I'm loving it. I'm very Neptunian, to like that Mars ruled Aries, where you're like, no, I'm doing this now. This is something that I'm making a long-term goal. So there was that. And then in between, in those progressions, there were a couple of things that happened. Um, I had too many examples to show you all of them, but further down the road, so in about 2014, the progression showed that I was going to be going even further, because you can also take that, and look at your natal chart as well, if you want to just add every single wheel on there. So you're looking at 5 or 6. But so there were some moves that indicated relocation. So there was a relocation. There would have been a relocation in there. And that was in the solar arc directions. It was a Pluto transit. It was a Pluto transit affecting the moon, the natal moon of the business. And so there was a relocation in there, and that was listed. So you looking at the solar arc directions is definitely going to give you those deeper, more transformative, like, this change is coming and you can't stop it kind of a feel. And then in 2022, my business went through its next incarnation. And so that's the election for actually closing down my business and reopening under a different name with a different focus. So the focus did change, because when I started doing business, I was primarily a tarot reader and I did some astrology on the side. And then as things progressed, the focus shifted to, I like the astrology better. I'm going to do that. And you can tell by the moon phases, because the moon did come around full circle. And the natal moon for the business is in Aquarius, anyways, which is a sign closely associated with astrology, conjunct Uranus and conjunct Neptune. Like, that's my happy place. Like, that's what I needed to feel secure. So that is actually when I did another business name change, and declared that it's going to be astrology forward in tarot secondary.
Great. What about transits to progressed planets? I know that's used sometime. What is your thoughts?
Transits to progress planets I will look at, but I don't take them as the know all end all be all. I will look primarily transits to natal, and then I'll use transits to progression as kind of a validation. So, are there transits to the progressed planets that validate the change that I'm seeing in the natal?
Great. Would you be concerned about launching a business with debilitated planets?
If they had proper support, no. I'm going to give you a yes or no on that one. It depends on the planet. If the one planet that you want to look at for a launch, and this is where the electional astrology gets really detailed, because sometimes you have to launch that business at 3 o'clock in the morning in order to get the ascendant that you want. So the one planet that you want to make sure for an election or launch that is not debilitated by any stretch of the imagination is the ruler of the ascendant. The Lord of the Ascendant has to be properly placed in the second, sixth, eighth, 10th, or even the 11th, depending on what the election is. That is definitely one thing that, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. That was the next set of slides when you're making elections. But that's the one planet that can't be debilitated. All the other ones, as long as you have some sort of mitigating influence, like if you had a planet that was debilitated, but it was in mutual reception with a planet that wasn't, that would be a good indication of an election that you could use.
Yeah. And that's the thing too to keep in mind, right, Brett? Like there is no perfect chart.
Exactly.
And so it's really
Exactly.
good to like highlight those very specific things that people should look out for because it can kind of get overwhelming at a certain point. And so that goes to
Oh,
this
for sure.
question, which is do you use 45, 135, 150-degree aspects, contra, parallels, things like that? Do you look at
Exactly.
those as well or just the Ptolemaic aspect?
I look at some of them. Like I will look at some of the other aspects. Like I'll look at quintiles, biquintiles, and like semi-squares. Those I'll look at. Primarily the Ptolemaic aspects. And especially for doing elections, you want to stick to as ancient as possible. That's the highlight with that one. Like you should stick to the Ptolemaic aspects because that goes in alignment with the ancient rulerships and it goes in alignment with, how they did elections way back in the day. So that's something that, to prevent yourself from going down the rabbit hole, because you can go down the rabbit hole for sure. Any aspect of astrology, you can go down the rabbit hole. And so the Ptolemaic aspects will simplify it, but it also keeps you in alignment with the ancient rulerships and more ancient astrology. Now, these techniques can be used with any, astrological system that you're doing, and they can also be used with any house system as well. And so for most of my predictive work, I'll use the predictive thing. I'll use the predictive house system that I use for business planning. And now, but yeah, that was going off on a tangent, so I apologize. Any other questions?
There's about 10 more questions, Brett, but there's only about 15 more minutes, and I want to make sure you get to the rest of your slides.
Sure, let's
So
do it.
why don't you finish up and then if there's time, we'll get to the rest of the questions. That sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. So moving on. So my guidelines for doing your business elections, getting back to the ascendant, you want the right ascendant for the job. The Lord of the Ascendant should not be debilitated in any way, shape, or form. And also the Lord of the Ascendant should be prominently placed in the first, second, 10th, ideally. You also want to make sure that there are no challenging aspects to the ascendant or to the Lord of the Ascendant. And now the rest of your planets for your business elections, you ideally want to do your benefics in your first 10th or 11th, and you want to mitigate the malefics to your cadent houses. So you want to mitigate the influence by placing them where the sun don't shine. And that's pretty much what you're doing with the malefic in a cadent house. You want to try and avoid retrogrades in any election. And you also want to look to supportive or creative aspects. So you want a lot of sextiles, trines, quintiles, trines in particular. So if you can get a grand trine, that would be ideal. And some of my pro tips for making the best business election is evaluate the condition of your moon, focus on initiating your new projects during a new waxing or gibbous moon phase. You want to avoid the moon void, of course. And you also want to try and avoid combustion. And if you don't know what combustion is, it's when the sun is not on top of a planet, degree for degree, minute for minute, but it's next to that planet. It causes that planet to be weakened and gives it kind of a restrictive influence. You also want to support Mercury for your technology and communication, and you want to support Jupiter and Venus for growth and investments. And now remember again, use both your ancient and your modern rulerships. So now, getting back to retrogrades, how can you make retrogrades work for you. Once you understand the meaning, the fullness of what a retrograde does, it gives it, I think, a better perspective on their purpose and also how you can use them super effectively. So when planets are in retrograde, especially Mercury, it causes a collective groan. And so you want to reframe those into productive periods that help you accomplish your goals. It's the universe's way of giving you time to check and adjust. And so when you're looking at the Mercury retrograde, which happens the most often, you're going to be checking and adjusting your communication and marketing. It's your optimal time to review and revise your business strategies, your plans, your marketing, because Mercury is communication, and also auditing your operations. How can I make this more efficient? You want to use your Mercury retrograde periods for reconnecting and following up with your past clients, reviving your email list, following up on services rendered, and also a great time to ask for reviews. And you can also look to Mercury retrograde to help you reflect and organize. You're going to be revisiting some of those internal tasks and catching up on your admin. And it's also a great time to clean out your inbox. I know mine's full. I know what my plan is the next time Mercury goes retrograde. And this is also the time when you want to finish up your admin projects like filing or reorganizing or streamlining your workflows in some way, shape, or form. Excuse me. So, Venus retrogrades are a great time to reassess your values, finances, and image. And so, you want to use this as your time to make plans to change any outward presentation. So, this would be a time where you would plan to change your web page, or you make the plan to, visually, you know, change your logo, or, check and adjust, but not launch. So you're going to look also to your social media. How are you presenting yourself? Venus retrogrades are also a great time to review client relationships. So you want to reflect on how you connect and deal with clients, and you also want to avoid any kind of new partnership or collaboration. But connect with your existing clients and revisit some of those conversations. You also want to use Venus retrogrades to reevaluate your finances and avoid making unnecessary or emotional purchases during that time. Now, Mars retrograde, which we're in right now, is all about your drive, action, and ambition. So you want to recalibrate your business strategy during this time. Do a financial review. Focus on reducing waste. And you also want to update and refresh your brand messaging because remember, Mars is outward drive and your visual identity without necessarily launching anything major. Mars retrogrades are also a great time for conflict resolution and refining any systems. Now, remember, Mars wants to go fast by nature. And so, this is a great time to review any kind of training programs and identify your knowledge or skill gaps and also declutter. I don't know why, but Mars retrograde seems to be a really good time to declutter. Probably because decluttering helps you get rid of some of that aggression. And then the last retrograde that I look at is your Jupiter retrogrades. We're in a Jupiter retrograde now. And so this gives you a great time to reanalyze your long-term goals and your vision. Jupiter retrogrades are a great time to go back over your business plan and to look at your mission and your values and see if they're in alignment. It's also a great time to take advanced courses or workshops and focus on improving your own personal knowledge and skill. Because if you are improving your knowledge and your skills, your business will benefit. So remember, retrogrades bring things back. You need to bring it back to the basics. And so, how can your business grow by learning? And what can you study, like new trends in your field, to gain a competitive edge when Jupiter moves direct? And you also want to use Jupiter retrogrades for networks and expanding your opportunities for philanthropy and looking to things that align with your business's mission and values. And now, with everything that you've learned today and the predictive tools that you can add to your arsenal in a new way, gives you a method of staying ahead of the curve. It helps you align your business strategies with cosmic cycles, and it turns challenges into opportunities and timing into advantage. Let the transits always be in your favor. And hopefully you guys were able to get some great tidbits out of this. And I want to get to the rest of your questions. So let's discuss.
Lovely. Okay. So here's the next question. Please explain how you determine disseminating phase for directed moon. I thought solar arcs maintain forever the same relationship between the sun and moon as in the natal chart.
In your solar arc, that is true. The solar arc does maintain the same relationship between sun and moon. So if your natal sun and moon are in a disseminating phase, that will continuously stay in the solar arc. To look at the moon phase, you really want to look at your secondary progressions.
Okay. Without access to professional astrological software, what's your recommendation for best ways to generate advanced timelines of all the various future aspects that we should be looking at? And is there some sort of cheat sheet somewhere that we can help identify important transits specifically when it comes to business usage? Are you only looking at the classical main planets? Do you also look at dwarf planets and asteroids? So, yeah, any sort of advice as far as like
Yeah.
kind of keeping it a little more simple, or what are the highlights that they should be looking at?
Well, to simplify it, as long as you know what your day-to-day transits are, as long as you know what your mundane transits are, you can do it. You can plan based off of your mundane transits. You don't have to add every single layer onto it. And if dwarf planets and if fixed stars and if asteroids are something that you look at as an astrologer, by all means, add them in there. I do sometimes. I simplified my charts just so it wasn't like blah to look at, but you can add really whatever layer. And that's what's great about predictive astrology is that you can add layers to it. It's an onion, man. Like you can either peel it away and simplify it down to only your ancient planets up to Saturn, or you could add every single dwarf planet all the way out to Gong Gong, it all depends on what kind of an astrologer you are. If you're a Uranian astrologer, you can apply the Uranian planets. You can apply all of that. But to simplify it, as long as you know your mundane transits, you're good to go because you know where the moon is going to be and you know what energy the moon is going to be giving you. So you can at least plan your day-to-day operations.
So, Brett, you mentioned looking at the social planets. We need to make sure you're not using a chart where the social planets have been in retrograde lately or about to go into their shadow period. What do you use as a cutoff time? How long from the previous retrograde or coming shadow?
Ooh, that's a good one. I will sometimes, this is, I know